In this section, we're going to be talking about from struggle to strategy and the path between where you are today and $100 million business. So you should never settle for less than $100 million business. And there's a couple of key reasons why that's important. First, performance. When you lower a bar to, I'm only trying to build a lifestyle business, or I'm only trying to build $1 million business, or I'm only trying to feed my family, what you're doing is you're actually lowering the chances of success. Because when you lower that bar, you lower the output and effort that you require of yourself in order to be successful. You set your expectations to a lower level. And when you do that, it has a consequence of basically aiming low and you're going to hit somewhat lower. And shooting for $100 million business is really about performance. It's about raising the bar, raising the requirements, and forcing yourself to think outside the box about how you can do something really fundamentally different than the way the world is doing things today. Second is valuation. So there are ways the world works, and your valuation of your business is a function of revenue and it's a function of performance. And there are certain dollar amounts that you need to get to in order to open new doors of opportunity and new doors of valuation for you. If you're a small company and you're doing 300K a year in revenue, or 400K a year in revenue, or $1 million a year in revenue, that sets you in the small business camp, and there's a valuation that comes along with that. And while that valuation may be good, it may be 1, 2x, that kind of thing. So the numbers end up being somewhat low. When you get to a kind of a number in between there, that the $3 to $5 million range, you're now at a place where you can get a valuation that may be more like 4 or 5x. And then once you get to a $10 million range, you have the ability to go into things that are like private equity and these other things that might actually give you an opportunity to increase your valuation further. And the idea is, if you're shooting for a low $1 million business, you're going to get something that when you exit it, you're only going to be able to exit it for a certain amount of money, a multiple of that's lower than if you just push a little bit harder and get to that next tier. And so valuation is a key thing for why we shoot for $100 million business. And then lastly, sustainability, right? So you have to get to the point if you want to exit a business, which you'll have to do at some point in your career, in some point in your life, and in some point in this business, you'll have to exit it. And so you can't sell a business that you're still required to operate. So you have to get it out. You have to get yourself out of the process. And so even if it's a lifestyle, even if you say, okay, I'm not going to do that, I just want to run this and then I'm going to hand it off to my kids or something like that. Even if it's a lifestyle, shouldn't it be a good lifestyle? Shouldn't you shoot for something that's going to be better than average? And so these things are the core reasons why we never shoot for something less than $100 million business: performance, valuation, and sustainability. Next, the thing to think about is, what are the top mistakes that founders make that I've seen? And I've made these mistakes. I have coached people on these mistakes. These are super common and they're the most common. And so that's why I want to cover them. The first is product obsession. So I still make this mistake all the time. I get focused on myself. I get focused on my tech. I get focused on me. And because of that, I am not focused on my customers, and I'm not focused on competitors and the competitive landscape. And the consequence of that is you can get into this mindset where you think, I have this great product. Why is nobody buying it? Nobody may be buying it because you're obsessed with yourself and you're not obsessed with solving customer problems. Don't make that mistake. You will make that mistake, but the best thing to do is acknowledge that you're there and try to turn around and correct it. The second is overpromising. So I've been burned by this as a product manager and marketing person within startups. You talk to the team, you build a product requirements document, you say, this is what I want the product to do. And you have one expectation in your mind, engineering delivers it, and it's not quite what you thought, but you've been out there marketing it, overpromising the capabilities of your platform. And so you have to think about it that it's only valuable. Your solution is only valuable when somebody actually buys it and uses it, right? It's not even the buying it that makes it valuable. It's the using it that makes it valuable. And the other thing is that customers are controlling your revenue. So you don't control revenue. You can't do anything to make revenue happen. You can only set the conditions by which you can produce revenue. You control costs, right? You control plans that have costs associated with them, but you don't control revenue. Customers do. And so you have to deliver a good experience for them because your reputation controls your destiny. So you may be able to get 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 people into your product. But if your product sucks, then, or the product doesn't meet their expectations of what the product should do, it will impact your reputation and it will further slow your ability to make sales. So overpromising is a huge mistake that people make. They talk about the sky's the limit. They're hyped up in this $100 million business that they're trying to make or VC funded stuff. But the reality is that none of that stuff matters. What matters is, did I set an expectation correct? And then did I meet or exceed it? So number 3 is capital versus hustle. So one of the big things that, because we get so excited about our product, we want to get out there to the market and we want to scale, but we tend to do that prematurely. And capital actually potentially makes it worse because the more money you have, the more you have this kind of urgent need to go spend it. And because of that, you'll end up hiring a bunch of people and you may do that prematurely. Every time you add a person, the amount of interconnections of communication goes up exponentially. And as a consequence of that, what ends up happening is the larger your team, the more complex it is to get that team to do anything. A litany of examples of this where companies go in, they get some money, they double their team size, and it doesn't improve their productivity at all. And the reason is because of all of this inordinate complexity. And so the thing I would tell you is that how you're going to get to the next step is all about hustle versus capital. Capital is helpful, it's useful, but it alone is not going to make your company successful. Hustle is the main thing that's going to get it done. So for your business, there are 5 business stages that matter. And what we're aligning and laying out in this course is the idea that there are a certain set of milestones that are required for you to go through in order to be effective at each one of these stages. We're going to go through strategy, then offer, then fit, then scale, then peak. And that's really the soup to nuts beginning of the thing from the end of the thing. And the thing that I want you to take away from this is that even if you are further along in the journey, the idea of going back and covering earlier stage actions is important because one, we constantly are revising our strategy. And so we're going to be going back and revisiting these things anyway. But more than that, if you haven't done a lot of these things, at least in some sort of minimum viable way, you're going to find yourself affected later on and things are going to be harder, more challenging, more difficult, more confusing, all of that. So it's a really good idea to go back and make sure, even if you're further along, that you've covered these individual stages. So let's go through them. So strategy, the idea of strategy is, what are we doing and how are we going to win? How are we going to get where we want to go? And so really what you're doing is you're building 2 things. You're defining winning. So what does winning really mean? And it's the idea that you are playing to win, not playing to play, right? I'm going to pick a market. When I have the opportunity, I'm going to figure out what I think the market landscape is. I'm going to pick a market that's going to play to my strengths and I'm going to dominate that market. That's what the idea of winning is. And so we define winning through an aspirational statement, say it correctly. And then we do a strategic plan that says, okay, where do we play? How are we going to dominate? What resources do we need? And most importantly, what truths have to hold for us to believe we're going to win with this strategy? And the idea of this is we're laying a groundwork that says, okay, we believe the market is this way. And because we believe the market is this way, we're going to go after these people. This is why they're going to buy. This is why we're going to dominate. And here's the resources at a high level and management tools that we need in order to do that. And so the idea is with all this strategy, when it's done well, It will create focus because it will define a lot of what you don't do as well as what you do. It will create momentum because it becomes this idea of how we're going to play and win. And when instilled in a team, it will help that team become more all the wood behind the arrow, if you know what I mean. And lastly, it, when a strategy is well defined, forces you away from the idea of self centricity, right? Or product obsession or self obsession, right? Because winning is about playing the game on a field with competitors, with customers. And so we try to focus ourselves toward that. And that's why strategy is key and is the first step and the first milestone or the first stage we have to go through. The second is offer. And offer comes down to really two concepts. One, belief, right? That you could communicate what you do in a way that someone believes that will get them where they need to go. That your approach is the right approach and the right strategy that will get them to success. And then the other is that you as a business can confidently deliver on what you say you are delivering. And so offer as a stage is really about saying, okay, here's what I do, here's what I can provide, and here's how these things come together and deliver some value to you, Mr. Customer. And so offer is really about defining that value and delivering internally the confidence to be able to deliver that value out to the marketplace. So fit is the third stage. And what fit basically represents is the idea of proof, right? That I can sell this thing, I can deliver it to the market, they can consume it, and they are willing to say, hey, this is great. Because if you can't make an offer, sell an offer, and have someone say it's good, then that you don't really have fit yet, right? You don't really have an understanding of where you're going to sell and what's valuable to the customer. And then lastly, you have to do all of that at high margin because if you're giving it away, then you don't have a viable business. Because as you go and as you scale, you're going to get less efficient and your margin's going to be impacted. So up to this point, you've got to be operating at really high margin. And if you're not doing so, then later stages, you're going to run into a lot of margin pressure that's going to limit your ability to be successful. So fit is about validating, refining, and improving your value and making sure you can deliver it at high margin. The next stage is scale. So scale is about transfer, right? So we are making sure that we can bring other people in to the process, transfer knowledge to them, have them digest it, articulate it, sell it, and deliver it. Essentially stopping you with big founder energy from being the thing that drives the business forward and trying to make the business sustain itself and operate without you being the one pushing all the buttons, turning all the gears, driving everything to make it all happen. And so that's really what the stage is about. And there's some objectives and milestones in there that we'll cover, but that's the key idea of scale. And then P is the last, right? And really it comes down to the idea of exit. So can you scale infinitely? You've got to produce incremental revenue every quarter. Or are you a feature in another more scalable solution? And both of these are viable, valid exits. And in fact, the truth in advertising, every deal I've done has been an exit where we've been a feature in somebody else's product. The number of businesses out there that are going to scale infinitely are really relatively low because there's a certain advantage to being a certain size and scale already. And so you as a startup, for you to be able to topple a giant is really challenging. So very often the best path for you is to be acquired. But the idea is where's the long-term value and how do you position yourself to maximize long-term value both for the business and for yourself as an individual. And so those are the stages that matter in a business. Again, strategy, offer, fit, scale, and peak. Next, what we're going to be covering conceptually is the 3 laws that dictate success for you. The things that I found that if I don't follow, I'm going to have a bad time. And so I'm going to cover those with you, and then we'll move on to the brass tactics of strategy, offer, fit, scale, and peak. And lastly, I want to leave you with a thought that Reid Hoffman said: an entrepreneur is a doer, not a dreamer, right? So it is mostly effort and mostly hustle that's going to get you there. If you think that your approach, your strategy is going to be a function of a great idea and you're not going to have to do a lot of hard work to make it happen, then you're kidding yourself. An entrepreneur is a doer, not a dreamer.